thought-provoking discussion, and thanks to the organizers for making this happen. I've been sort of wrestling with trying to figure out how I want to frame my question, but I'll give it my best shot. I guess the sort of first piece that I want to touch on is this idea of the image of God. And if the image of God is man as separate from nature, or as better than nature in terms of our capacity, I wonder if that's the ideal image for God, given that it's that very same capacity which has given us the ability to destroy God's creation. And I wonder if also how you, when you sort of provide this idea of the image of God in man, that we have this sense of agency, yet I hear no sense of agency in God. I don't hear you talking about morality coming from God. It's simply that it's reflected in us as God. And it seems to be a contradiction between the image of man as an agent, whereas God has no agency in that definition.
I think you had a question there, so should we let Dr. Wren answer?
I wanted to throw one thing in, just so I'm not picking on the gods. I'm also wondering, given that we have no scientific proof of evolution, of how the Big Bang has taken place, we can talk about evolution from that point on.
This actually sounds like a second question, okay. which is
no second question.
You get one question, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay. From a Christian perspective, the idea that which that which defines us as bearing God's images are also the same capacities that we have that allow us to destroy the creation, I think is, from a Christian perspective, explicable in the idea that human beings basically have rebelled against God. And so, the fall essentially inaugurated the destruction of the planet, if you will. So I see when the passage says that the earth is cursed because of you, it's not that God cursed his creation. I see it as rather that because human beings now are operating apart from God's desire, that we are not capable of doing that which we were initially commanded to do, which was to be caretakers or stewards of the planet. So yes, it is that those very capabilities that we would call the image of God, which would allow us to subdue and be caretakers of the planet and serve as God's viceroy here on the planet, are also the very capacities that cause the destruction. But Christianity explains that as a result of the fall.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly make a point about the role of God as playing an explanation and the Christian narrative as explaining certain things about human beings. Karl Popper was a philosopher of science in the 1950s and 40s who had an important insight about the nature of explanations, which is that if they explain too much, it's actually a bad thing because they can't actually be overturned. So I think that's sort of what I don't deny that, if the fall happened and God was, an omniscient mind in the sky, that these things would appear. But in a sense, they explain too much, and there's sort of nothing that we could ever observe that would overturn them, which is problematic for it as an explanation.
Okay. Yes, sir.
So my question simply is the matter of morality not really wrapped up the component that I didn't hear here today about authority? Because as you say about science not being able to tell us what to value or what to believe, I would say that it actually does. One tribe goes in, where you see the leftovers of one tribe going in and eradicating another tribe, and observing scientifically the ending of family relationships, the ending of cultural expression, the whatever, and choosing either to value the ending of that as a twisted value. It is through the observation and the perspective of the heart, which I would suggest is incapable of making objective decisions that way, that what was required...
You started off really well by saying my question is, but
the authority being that man is not capable, and that we needed an authoritative voice, the revelation from God himself, that though you're trying to do the best you can, there has to be a goalpost. And do you not agree that there needs to be authority outside of man's subjective?
I do disagree with that. And the reason is an epistemic point, which is about human knowledge. So let's suppose there were such an authority that had perfect insight into what would be conducive to human happiness. So let's suppose human happiness is what we all want, and there is a perfect authority out there. The problem still remains how we should identify that authority as the authority to human happiness. And ultimately, the way that we have to go about doing that is through relying on what we actually value. So if there are, if everybody here is claiming to know what is conducive to human happiness, and only one person is, the way that I'm going to go about judging those claims is through the values that I bring to that process. So in other words, even the choosing of an authority involves the values that you assume in evaluating an observation. So for example, you talk about one tribe eradicating another and evaluating that to be bad. Well, that's not a consequence of science. That's a value that you bring to your observations. No amount of observing tribes eradicating one another or looking at